All right, so I'll tell you a little backstory about, what's kind of going on before we go too far into the video so you get a recap of what's going on. So, last video, after we got finished up with everything, I said I would pick back up whenever we were at the tuner and was doing all that. But unfortunately, all that didn't work out too well. I took the car to the tuner and they said that my spark plugs were fouled out and asked if I wanted them to replace them so they could do the tune. And I said, of course, go ahead, do whatever it needs. So they replaced the spark plugs, and then they said they got it to run. They did a couple pulls with it or whatever, and they had to tune it in open loop because of the O2 sensors or something like that. But whenever I told them, replace whatever it needs, to get it running right or to be able to tune it, you can. So I would have thought they would have threw some of those in, just to get it right. But whatever the fact, that didn't happen. So I picked the car up, and after they said it was done, you know what I mean. They said whenever they first called me and said it's ready to pick up, and he told me how much horsepower it made, I knew something was wrong and like something was off because he told me the car made around 330 wheel after doing all this stuff, which I know for a fact is completely wrong. Everybody knows that. With everybody that's done stuff like this, even without a tune, are making more horsepower than that. But besides the fact, I picked the car up and then I drive to the gas station, which is like 2 miles down the road because my gas light's on from them doing pulls and stuff, I guess. Almost on E, so gas light's on. I pull into the gas station and it dies whenever I pull up to the gas pump after I come to a complete stop. I'm like, well, it might just be because it's driving, for the first couple of times, which also made me think, did they not drive my car after they tuned it to make sure it was all right? Because, they would have noticed this and they didn't, mention anything about that. So I drive it home, which is about 30 minutes, 25 minutes. So I'm driving it home and the car's acting weird. Every time it comes to a stop, it dies, takes forever to crank up, start up. I'm hearing this just a rattle in the top end, and I'm thinking, it's my fuel rails at first. That's what my first thought was because it sounded more like a clicking noise. I didn't know, if any of that was like maxing out. I wasn't sure. I didn't pull over or check it out. I was just like, I'm going to try to get this thing home. So I should have turned around and just brought it back, but I got about 5 miles away from my house and my check engine light started flashing at first, which I was like, oh crap. And then I heard, bad metal noise in the top end, and my exhaust, started sounding totally different. And I was like, crap. So I limped it, like the 5 miles back home, and it was like, what the crap? It didn't sound like the exhaust or anything was opening up. So, I immediately was like thinking, I done dropped the valve, I done did all this stuff, which I didn't know anything yet. I was just basing everything off, kind of like the worst thing that could happen. But I call up my buddy, Steven, that's been in some of my other videos, and he comes over and we take the valve covers off of the car and the coil packs and all that stuff to look at the rockers, and we find a great surprise, which I ended up showing you guys. But the rockers completely came apart, which, that's nobody's fault but my own. I put those were stock rockers I put in it. I originally got, a Trini upgraded rocker through Michigan Motorsports, but right before I was going to put them in the engine, I was seeing multiple things on Facebook with those exact rockers that I ordered, possibly out of the same batch. The tips of them were breaking off, like the training wasn't coming apart, but the tips of the actual rocker were breaking. So, I was like, I have everything else. This is the only thing I need. I'm gonna throw some stock ones in it just for a little bit, just in case, or just until I got some improved ones, because I was doing a lot of research on, different types like roller rocker and stuff like that, bolt down, but I wasn't sure yet. So we threw stock GM rockers in it, which don't do that. Don't put stock rockers in anything that you're gonna have more spring pressure, and then you got dual springs and do a cam and all that stuff. Get a training upgraded rocker, and then possibly, you know, a roller rocker to keep stress off of those valves and everything like that. But I ended up, after, you know, we got all this stuff figured out, I ended up actually bending a valve and doing a couple of other things that you'll see in the video. But there's the backstory. You know, that was the first day after I got my car back from the tuner, all excited to drive, rip around town, you know, go show everybody, and ended up being costly. You know, the tune was very expensive, which I'm not going to say any names. You know, I don't want to say anybody really did anything, but you know, it's hard to say. So we're just going to leave it at that, and then we'll get straight into the video. Hope you guys like it, and stay tuned. What happened was the rocker itself didn't break. They did not break. The bearings inside is what fails. That's why you need that trinion upgrade. All those needle bearings inside that were inside of this are now inside of my engine. I'm going to have to take the oil pan and everything off and flush it out real good and do all that. But in the process of that breaking, as you saw, I bent this valve right here. So now I got to take this header off and this head off and the intake so I can put a new exhaust valve in it. That's the number 2 exhaust valve on these LS engines. This first one, exhaust number 1's over there, exhaust 2's right here. So luckily I think it broke on the way down, so it didn't touch a piston or anything, so I'll be okay there. But still kind of scary, you know what I mean? With all this engine being, or with all this metal being in your engine. But just a little bit of work and we'll get it all figured out. But I was going to go ahead and show you guys some tips and tricks on this tight engine space on these F bodies, taking this header off and everything like that. So stay tuned with me, and then I'll show you guys some of that. So believe it or not, I got all of the bolts out of this header without needing a swivel socket. They say it's impossible to get these headers off with this amount of space without a swivel socket or anything like that. But all you need is a adjustable ratchet that you can bend and manipulate whatever way you want it. And then this was the greatest thing, was my 1/4 inch ratchet. So there's no room to put the head of this ratchet on without hitting the header. So if you look, this goes perfectly down and doesn't hit any of the header spots. So the only thing is you can't get much oomph with this tiny thing. So you kind of got to stand sideways and get all your body weight into it to break it loose for that initial break. And then after that, it's not that hard. Honestly, it's pretty easy. And the same thing with this intake. You see how there's no room back there to get any of that. Well, luckily, got a little short, stubby 8mm, 10mm socket and put it on this. And as you can see, I got the very back ones all the way out, and all this is ready to come off. I just need my fuel disconnect lines from work, and that'll be popped off so we can get the rest of those head bolts out. But yeah, a 1/4 inch, small 1/4 inch with a small socket on the end will be your savior for this. Now on the head bolts, I can't say the same. You can't use this little thing to get these torqued head bolts off, but this works just fine for 3 or 4, but these these back ones you're gonna need a swivel for. So I'm gonna have to go back to my box and grab some tools before I head back over here and continue on this. But yeah, hasn't been too bad. Luckily, none of them broke on this side. They were coming loose. The bearings on the inside of those rockers were coming loose on this side, but there was no contact. Nothing touched. None of the valves broke, so we're good on that side. Thankfully, I don't have to take both heads off. But I will get a new exhaust valve today at some point. Gonna try to get this head all the way off, and then luckily, I can still reuse my spring here. So I didn't know if there was going to be any damage to the spring itself on the one that broke, but as you can see, I'm going to need a new retainer. It chewed that up, and one of the locks for the retainer are somewhere in the engine. But other than that, it doesn't seem like we're too bad off. I'll just flush this with some transmission fluid, pour it down my head, and we should be good to go. So after I get this head off and I get this valve, I'll pick the camera back up so I can show you guys how to install the new valve and then install the retainer and lock and all of that. So I guess we'll just wait on that and then do what we can do in the meantime. So I'll see you guys again whenever I pick the camera back up. All right, so after a few days of going to work and not having time to deal with this thing, I'm back in the garage and we got some work done. So the last time where I left off, the intake was still bolted down in I think in the very back, and a few other things. Well, I got went ahead and took the air box off and the fuel lines and all that. I did leave the fuel rails bolted down so you could lift this intake up. Unfortunately, there's not enough room to just lift it up and then straight out. The bolts in the back and the middle two bolts are too long. They won't come all the way out of it. I'm sure there's a way, but I'm being kind of lazy. And to get to these top head bolts on this side, I just lift this thing up and then shove a rag right there, just enough to lift it up so you ain't got to have nobody with you. Put a rag right there and then get your bolts out. So I got all of those out besides this very back one back there, which you can't see. It's literally impossible. So it's more of a feel type thing. So I'm kind of working on that now. These bottom bolts I tried to get with a swivel just a second ago, and it doesn't look like that's gonna happen. I'm gonna have to, luckily we clamped the exhaust past the header, so in case we needed to ever drop it, we could. We didn't weld it right there, which is saving me a lot of time and effort right now. So I got to undo that clamp, drop this exhaust back a little bit so I can get to those bolts, and then it seems like we'll be ready to take this head off besides that very last bolt. So fingers crossed I can get this last one, and then I'll pick up whenever we make a little more progress. So I ended up tracking down some valves, and fortunately my buddy had a few heads off of LS1 that he didn't want to do anything with. He just had them laying around, so he let me have these. They're dressed. I'm not going to use anything in them besides maybe the valve, and I'm still not 100% sure on that. I might just go ahead and get a new one, but these heads aren't in too bad a shape in case I want to use them on something else I ever come up with another project, which I don't need. Could throw those on it. This one unfortunately does look like it had something hit it once or twice, as you can see, so I don't think I'll be able to use this one, but still got some valves and stuff in it that could be useful in spare time. So gratefully they were free and I didn't have to pay anything for them, so that's always a bonus. You can't beat that. So let's get to it. All right, we finally got this head off, and fortunately it's a little worse than we expected at first, but as you can see, that valve's pretty bent, which we knew that, but we didn't know exactly, you know, when it got bent, if it hit the piston a couple times or not. But unfortunately it did. So last night after we got the head off, we saw that, and it was nothing major. It just literally hit it maybe like 5 or 6 times, and we got a scratch bright pad with and rubbed it on there and evened everything out, and then looks pretty good now. A lot better than it was. I think we're gonna be okay to run it like this. I mean, I don't think it'll create any hot spots or anything like that. But you can see kind of like a shallow dish in it from where it hit right there. But we went ahead and just resurfaced that whole thing. Worst case scenario, you know, we run it for a while and it's got to come back out, but at least we're gonna run it. So not too much to worry about other than that. I checked out the this head, and everything else looks good in there, so I don't have anything else to worry about. I got another valve in there already, and as you can see, the guide or nothing like that's messed up on the inside, so that's a plus. I don't have to buy any heads or anything like that, or use those ones over there. I did end up using this valve from it though, but as you can see, you know, it sets perfectly fine on there. What are you doing? Sets perfectly fine on there, seats fine. So it's not crooked or anything, you know, you can spin it and matches up with the rest of them. I'm gonna try to get some of this carbon off the rest of these valves from whenever it collapsed, all that carbon built up. I don't think I fouled that plug out, which I was having a hard time. I already fouled 2 sets of plugs out before I got it running like from the tuner, from starting it up in the parking lot and then getting the transmission in and just running heat cycles and stuff through it to make sure the engine was good. But I think I'm in luck this time and don't have to do anything like that. So, but other than that, we got the intake and all that off. I was having a map sensor code, but I was looking back there and it doesn't look like any of that is messed up. So I don't know if they didn't change the min max in the with the tune or not. So can't really tell. So we'll start getting all this stuff back together after I get a few parts. Unfortunately, all I need is a retainer and then 2 locks. That spring didn't get, where is it? The spring didn't get messed up really at all. So I'm just gonna go ahead and reuse it. Put a cap and some locks on it. I'm not gonna use these. These were the ones that fell off. So after I get that stuff back on there and we start slapping everything back in, I'll whip the camera back out. But until then, please like and subscribe.